I'll never forget the moment I realized someone was actively trying to destroy everything I'd built, not because of something I'd done, but simply because I'd fallen in love with the wrong person's ex-girlfriend. Standing in my boss's office that cold February morning, watching my career crumble around me based on lies I couldn't immediately disprove, I understood that loving Emma Richardson came with a price I never anticipated paying. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus had spent 6 months methodically dismantling my reputation, my job, and nearly my sanity. All because he couldn't accept that she'd chosen a high school teacher from Connecticut over a Wall Street trader with a corner office and a God complex. But what Marcus didn't count on, what he couldn't possibly understand, was that some women don't choose the biggest bank account or the most impressive resume. Some women choose the man who makes them feel safe, seen, and genuinely loved. Emma was that kind of woman, and this is the story of how she proved it when it mattered most. If you believe in second chances, in choosing love over status, and in standing by the people who truly matter, please hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything, and it helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. I met Emma at a charity book drive in Hartford during the autumn of 2023. She was volunteering, sorting donated novels into boxes for underprivileged schools. Her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans with paint stains and an oversized sweater that had seen better days. There was something magnetic about her presence, the way she genuinely smiled at everyone who dropped off books, the way she treated the elderly volunteers with the same warm respect she showed the teenagers helping out for community service hours. I'd brought 3 boxes of books from my classroom, ones my students had outgrown, and when our hands touched as I passed them to her, I felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not since my divorce 5 years earlier had I allowed myself to even consider the possibility of real connection. But Emma made me reconsider everything. We started talking, and hours disappeared like minutes. She told me she worked as a pediatric nurse at Connecticut Children's Medical Center, that she'd recently ended a 3-year relationship that had become suffocating, that she was rediscovering who she was outside of someone else's expectations. I told her about teaching American literature to high schoolers, about my failed marriage to someone who'd wanted me to be something other than a teacher, about my small apartment and my even smaller salary, and my enormous love for what I did despite neither being particularly impressive on paper. She looked at me with these incredible hazel eyes and said something I'd never forget. The most impressive thing about a person isn't what they have, it's who they are when nobody's watching. 3 weeks later, we had our first official date at a small Italian restaurant in West Hartford, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was falling for her. What I didn't know was that her ex-boyfriend Marcus wasn't the type of man who accepted rejection gracefully. Emma had broken up with him 6 months before we met, ending things after realizing that his version of love looked a lot like control. He dictated what she wore to his work functions, criticized her career choice as beneath someone with her intelligence, and constantly reminded her that his income made their lifestyle possible, as if love could be purchased with expensive dinners and designer handbags. When she finally left him, he'd been shocked, genuinely unable to comprehend why a pediatric nurse would walk away from a man who could afford to give her everything. Except he couldn't give her the one thing that mattered, the freedom to be herself. Emma tried to explain this to him, but Marcus lived in a world where everything had a price tag, including human dignity. For the first 4 months Emma and I were together, life felt almost perfect. We took long walks through Elizabeth Park, had movie nights in my modest apartment where we'd make popcorn and debate the merits of classic films versus modern cinema, and spent weekends volunteering together at various community organizations. She met my students when she came to a school play I'd directed, and they loved her immediately, asking me the next day if she was my girlfriend with the kind of hopeful enthusiasm that only teenagers can muster. I met her colleagues at the hospital, was humbled by the important work they did, and felt proud to be with someone whose daily job involved saving children's lives. My salary might not have afforded us fancy restaurants every week, but we were building something real, something grounded in mutual respect and genuine affection. I should have known it was too good to last. Marcus made his first move in January, Emma started receiving text messages from unknown numbers, messages that contained photos of us together taken from a distance, photos we didn't know existed. The texts were never directly threatening, just unsettling, reminders that someone was watching, documenting, waiting. Emma changed her number, but the messages found her new one within days. Then my principal called me into her office, her expression troubled, and told me that someone had filed a formal complaint with the school board alleging that I'd behaved inappropriately with a student during an after-school tutoring session. The accusation was completely false, and the security footage from the library proved it, but the investigation process was humiliating nonetheless. My colleagues looked at me differently during those 2 weeks, and I knew that even after being cleared, some shadow of suspicion would linger in certain minds. That's how lies work. They don't need to be proven to cause damage. Emma was furious when I told her about the complaint. She immediately suspected Marcus, knowing his vindictive nature, his inability to move on, his connections throughout Connecticut's professional networks. But suspecting and proving were two different things, and Marcus was too smart to leave obvious fingerprints on his sabotage. The anonymous complaint, the untraceable messages, the subtle rumors that started circulating about me being involved with a woman who was after my money, which was almost funny given that teachers in Connecticut make decent salaries but are hardly wealthy. Marcus was playing a long game, one designed to make me look unstable, unsuitable, unworthy of Emma's affection. And for a while, I started believing it might be working. February brought the crisis to a head. I arrived at school one Monday morning to find my classroom had been vandalized over the weekend. Books torn, desks overturned, and spray painted across my whiteboard were the words, "Predator. They know what you did." My heart sank into my stomach as I stood there, my teaching career flashing before my eyes. The police were called, an investigation launched, and I was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. My union representative assured me this would be resolved, that the school had excellent security systems, that the truth would prevail. But standing in that destroyed classroom, I felt utterly defeated. This wasn't just about my job anymore. This was about my entire identity. My reputation in a community I'd served for 12 years, my ability to do the work I loved with students who needed committed teachers. Emma found me that evening sitting in my apartment, staring at the wall, wondering if I should just walk away from everything to protect what little remained of my dignity. She sat beside me, took my hand, and said words that would change everything. "He's trying to break you because he knows you're the better man. He can't compete with who you actually are, so he's trying to destroy the life you've built. But I won't let him win, and neither will you." Then she told me she'd done something I'd never expected. She'd hired a private investigator, someone who specialized in cyberstalking and harassment cases, and had been quietly building a case against Marcus for weeks. She documented every anonymous message, every suspicious incident, every timing coincidence that pointed back to him. And she'd found something crucial: security footage from a parking garage showing Marcus near my school the night before. The vandalism, time-stamped hours before the damage was discovered. The evidence Emma's investigator compiled was damning. Marcus had used burner phones to send the harassing messages, had paid a former colleague to file the false complaint against me, and had even bragged about his plans to a friend via email, arrogantly confident that his actions were untraceable. Emma took everything to the police, who opened a formal investigation into Marcus for stalking, harassment, and vandalism. Within 3 weeks, he was arrested at his downtown office, led out in handcuffs past the colleagues he'd worked so hard to impress. The school board cleared my name completely. I was reinstated with an apology from the superintendent, and my classroom was restored by volunteers from the community who'd heard what happened and wanted to help. But the most powerful moment came during the hearing where Marcus faced criminal charges. Emma testified about the years of emotional manipulation she'd endured while dating him, about his inability to accept her autonomy, about his threats when she'd left him for someone he considered beneath his status. She stood in that courtroom with absolute composure and said, "I chose Michael not because of what he could buy me, but because of who he is when nobody's buying anything. He's kind to grocery store clerks and janitors, He remembers his students' names and their struggles. He volunteers his Saturdays to help kids who can't afford tutors. Marcus couldn't understand that those things matter more than stock portfolios and expensive watches. And when he tried to destroy the man I love, he proved exactly why I was right to leave him. If this story has touched your heart, if you've ever had to choose between what looks good on paper and what feels right in your soul, please show this video some love. Like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear that real love isn't about status or wealth. It's about character, kindness, and choosing each other even when the choosing gets hard. Marcus was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to probation, community service, and mandated counseling. He lost his job when his firm learned about his criminal behavior. Ironic twist that seemed almost too poetic to be real. But more importantly, he lost whatever power he thought he had over Emma's life and mine. The experience changed us both, deepening our relationship in ways that easy romance never could have. We'd faced someone actively trying to destroy what we were building, and we'd chosen to build it anyway, stronger and more intentional than before. 6 months after the trial ended, I proposed to Emma in Elizabeth Park, the same place we'd walked on our second date. I didn't have an expensive ring, just a simple band I'd saved for months to afford, and I didn't make some elaborate production of the moment. I just told her the truth, that she'd shown me what real love looked like when she stood by me during the darkest period of my life, that her strength had given me strength, and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the choice she'd made. She said yes with tears streaming down her face, and we sat on that park bench holding each other while the sun set, painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, please comment chosen below right now. We got married. In a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family, including many of my students who asked if they could attend to celebrate their favorite teacher finding happiness. Emma wore a simple dress she'd found at a boutique in downtown Hartford, and I wore the same suit I wore to parent-teacher conferences, and it was absolutely perfect. During our vows, Emma said something that made everyone in attendance cry. "You didn't save me from Marcus. I saved myself. But you showed me what I was saving myself for, what real partnership looks like, what it means to be chosen for who you are rather than what you represent, and I will choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Now, 2 years later, we're building the life we both dreamed of. We bought a small house in West Hartford with a backyard for the dog we adopted from a shelter, and we still volunteer together on weekends. My classroom is full of students who work hard because they know I believe in them, and Emma still saves children's lives at the hospital while somehow making every kid feel like the most important patient she's ever had. We're not wealthy by Marcus's standards, but we're rich in the ways that actually matter, in love, in purpose, in community, in the daily choice to show up for each other with honesty and kindness. Her ex tried to ruin my life, tried to prove that a man without money and status wasn't worthy of someone like Emma, but she chose me anyway, not because I was perfect or impressive, but because I was real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. Real love isn't about who can provide the most expensive life. It's about who you want beside you when life gets hard, who makes you better simply by believing in who you are, who chooses you not despite your imperfections but including them. Emma chose me, and I choose her, every single day, and no amount of sabotage could ever change that truth.